I am Lisa Austin. I am the director of the Bruce Gallery here at Edinburgh University.
Wonderful. Great to see you all. Okay, thank you, Lisa. All right, welcome this evening. Thank you so much for joining our virtual conversation across state lines. I'm currently in Lubbock, Texas. My name is Dr. Leslie Sotomayor, and I'm a Women's and Gender Sexualities professor at Texas Tech University this year. But previously, I was at Edinburgh University, and I was a professor there in the art education department. And I had the great opportunity in the time that I was living in the Erie area to get to know and make some really wonderful relationships at Edinburgh campus, but also in the local community. And tonight we are celebrating some of those connections and relationships with this virtual talk to celebrate not only the Let's Pretend art exhibition at the Bruce Gallery at Edinburgh, but also I'm being joined by three of the artists that are a part of that show. Lourdes Jasso, Armando Reyes, and Antonio Howard. So thank you so much for volunteering and being able to join this session. And hopefully have some really great discussions about art and how it affects our identities, our work, our creative process, and who we are as individuals in our respective communities. So what I wanted to do was to say a little bit about the premise for the Let's Pretend art exhibition, how it came to be, give a little bit of history on that, and then I will turn it over to each of our artists to share a little bit about their work that's in the show, who they are as artists. They're also living in the Erie area. And they could speak about some of those components and how it influences their work. And then we will enter in dialogue together, the four of us, about the show, our work, and then open it up for Q&A towards the end and hear from all of you that are joining us, that have taken the time this evening to join us. So back in the spring, the early spring of 2020, I was invited into a lot of different community spaces in the Erie area. And one of them was a phenomenal collaboration between Edinburgh University, Bruce Gallery, Erie Arts and Culture with Patrick Fisher, who is not able to join us tonight, but who was also a very big part of all of this coming together. Also, Alexa Potter from the MPAA, and Savitas as well, that Lisa Austin and Roland Slade are a part of. And all of these parts in the area came together and hosted and facilitated a conversation, cultural conversation around Aruna D'Souza's book, and Protest in Three Acts, Art, Race, and Protest in Three Acts. Sorry about the title. And so we came together as a community coming from a lot of different disciplines. So artists and activists, scholars, writers, coming together to engage in virtual conversations around this book and a lot of the social issues that were being presented. And in the midst of these conversations and book discussions also came about a lot of the turmoil that we have since continued enduring in the United States as a country, and a lot of social issues that have been extremely difficult to navigate amongst, and one of those being the assassination of George Floyd. And with that being one of the big horrific events that occurred in 2020 that really marked a conversation about race and systemic racism and discrimination within the United States. As creative citizens, we came together to discuss these topics, which ended up causing many of us to interrogate our own creative and studio practice and how we fit into these conversations within the art world. From that point, we were given or invited into the opportunity with the Bruce Gallery to be able to showcase and express through our creative mediums what were some of the things that we were grappling with. And that is how the culmination came together for a select group of artists who volunteered and wanted to be a part of this collective to create art for the show Let's Pretend. And we came about with that title as a group collective to talk to systemic power that's in play that oftentimes is beyond our control. And how can we navigate these spaces? How do we move within these spaces as artists and creative figures? So in that spirit and inspiration is how we came together as artists and creative entities to create work and display it within the Bruce Gallery that now we're going to be sharing with you a little bit more. And just to repeat, Aruna D'Souza's book that our critical conversations took place in is Whitewalling, Art, Race, and Protest in 3 Acts. So that became the cornerstone or the foundation for our expression through our work in a variety of ways that will be showcased here today with 3 of our artists. So having said that, I will be sharing some images, but so will the artists about their work in the show. And if you haven't had the opportunity to check it out at Bruce Gallery, Edinburgh University campus, please contact Lisa or who opened up tonight, or check out the website and we'll put those links in the chat so that you can access that. So first I want to turn it over to Lourdes Jasso. And Lourdes, welcome. Thank you so much for taking time to be a part of our conversation today. It's great to see you.
Thank you, Leslie. I'm really excited to be part of this panel. I am going to read to you my artist statement, and it is in Spanish with no translation. Ni de aquí ni de allá. Nací en Acámbaro, Guanajuato, México, en 1983. En 1986, mis padres decidieron traerme a mí y a mis hermanas a los Estados Unidos. En 1986, firmó el presidente Ronald Reagan el 6 de noviembre. Después de tanto, firmó un bill dejando que todos los ciudadanos puedan hacerse ciudadanos y residentes. En 1998, después de tanto tiempo y dinero, por fin había llegado mi número y mi cita con inmigración, y fue cuando me hice residente. 2 años después, Bill Clinton firmó the Child Citizen Act of 2000. En 2001, oficialmente me hice ciudadana de los Estados Unidos. Todo el proceso solo tomó 15 años. Me crié en la Villita y Brighton Park en Chicago, donde la cultura mexicana es sobresaliente. Mis fotos reflejan el orgullo que tengo hacia mi patria, a la vez mis obstáculos como mujer inmigrante viviendo en los Estados Unidos, que define el panorama político. So yes, one of the arts or one of the pieces that I have is this one behind me. I did a triptych. Leslie, I don't know if you have pictures.
I do.
Those.
Yes.
If,
I will pull them up in a minute.
So a lot of my artwork has to deal with my perception as how it feels to be a Mexican immigrant in the US. I grew up in a mainly Latino community and felt welcomed all the time. And there was a big community. When I moved to Erie, I felt like that was lacking. Until this day, we're, being part of Chroma Guild is helping with that sense of community. But these are my three pieces. It kind of has, it's derived from hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil. And also the stereotypes of when you hear that I am a Mexican woman. Usually when I grew up, I saw myself as in the movies as being the chola, right? That's our perception. And then the rest are the other stereotype of either we're indigenous women, or I feel like I have no voice. That's the one in the middle. That one I I stitched it, which it says inmigrante. And then the other one, it's, as a Mexican immigrant, are we blinded? Or that's how people perceive us, as you're Mexican, you're a woman, it doesn't matter. You really don't matter. This piece is one of my favorite pieces. This one is kind of an homage to Diego Rivera for his vendor of the alcatraces, el vendedor de alcatraces. As women, the weight that we carry, it's unlike no other. Unless you're a woman, you would know. And if you're an immigrant or, from a different country, it's even more. In the background, you can see I kind of added my perception of what's going on with immigration reform, the lack of immigration reform, what's going on in the borders, the separation of families. This was created when this was like a big deal and the people were bringing light to it. And, I had everybody come, how do you feel? What's going on? And it's like, this has been going on for years. It's nothing new, but only because it was mainstream did it become popular. I wanted to bring light, to me, I feel such guilt as being, I guess what I would think, this is always hard for me, successful, to feel the guilt of that. I feel like I'm not doing enough for my people. So that's one of the pieces that I made. And it's 3D, it's not flat. It looks flat right now, but it's actually 3D. The basket is an actual basket. And then the calla lilies are actual calla lilies made out of foam. And then the detail is lost in here, but you can see that the detail inside of the actual flowers, their skulls to kind of represent the people that have died crossing the border. So, yeah. And just wanted to say, when I first wanted to be part, or somebody said, hey, we might have a show for a bunch of artists of color. And I was like, what is that in Erie? And then they're like, oh yeah, and a Latina is spearheading it. And I was like, excuse me? Like that for sure I knew I wanted to be part of. As artists, we can choose where we show our stuff. I have other artwork that I might not have shown. I never have shown in a gallery. I have only shown once, and that was in a immigration reform rally. I choose where I show my images. I choose where I show my art. And this was where I chose to be, because everybody there has been marginalized or has been part of a community where there's no representation. So for that reason, I was like, I'm in it. Let's do this. Yep.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lourdes. Next, I would like to introduce Antonio Howard. Antonio, if you would like to take over and share a little bit about your work.
Hey, my name is Antonio Howard. Before I get into my work, I want to say that that piece that you showed of Lourdes Jasso's is already sold to me. And if she hasn't decided to sell it to me, I'm saying I want that piece, period. That should go to nobody else. So I am what you would call a prison artist. And I would choose to refer to myself as a prison artist, primarily because in prison art for me was something that people referred to you as to disrespect you, right? So you had to be a prison artist if you were in prison because there was no possible way that you could just be an artist. Prison art is mediocre. It's a poorly rendered facsimile of art in general. So I decided to adopt the title as a slap in the face to whoever came up with it, right? As a form of resistance, period. So many of these pieces were created while I was in prison. The piece on my left is called Captured and symbolizes what it means to be suffocated by the concept of Blackness while having your eye on the American dream. The piece after that is called Juvenile Life Without Parole and symbolizes my experience while in prison. I was sentenced to life in prison at the age of 15, and I spent 26 and a half years there. And essentially, I wanted to capture that concept in an image that would give people the chills, right? Children in clothing that's too big for them, shirt and tie too big for them, because adults always want to make us look older than we are and the world to perceive us as more dangerous than we are. The piece on the far left, Malcolm, I think every African-American artist that I've met so far has some rendition of Malcolm as a creation. And Malcolm was somebody who inspired me early on. One of the first books I read while I was in prison was the autobiography of Malcolm X. And when I became an artist, I painted Malcolm X several times, but this green one just happened to be one of my favorite because it captures, I think, the beauty of Malcolm X in really beautiful green. And the green symbolizes the characteristics that the Nation of Islam wanted him to be known as an outcast, a snake to them. But to me, he's a beautiful, well-rendered and regal memory that I have of my growth and development while in prison. Piece after that is called Family First. It's spelled as if it's family fist, but if you look close, the fingers are a huddled family, essentially representing that we are stronger together than we are apart. The middle piece is a portrait of Harry T. Burleigh, who was a composer, a musician who was born in Erie, Pennsylvania. And initially this piece was done to honor Harry T. Burleigh's memory and to try to push him as a stamp, right? To get his face put on a stamp, you know, to honor his memory. And essentially, I was painting this for a friend and an African-American organization, the Burley Legacy Alliance. And I felt so honored to be painting for the Burley Legacy Alliance, until I was asked at one point to turn over my copyrights to the image. And, you know, it was something that I would have done if the way it was presented to me wasn't so deceptive. And it made me question my place in this world, not only as an African-American artist, but an artist in general in relationship to my community. In trying to show the world the value of my community, I had to question whether or not the images I was even producing were valuable to my community. And it turned out that by virtue of the proposition that was offered to me, it wasn't. So I put the words "ain't I worth it" over the front of it to capture two messages, asking the world, ain't Harry T. Burley worth a 55-cent stamp? Like, really, like after all these years, we ain't worth a 55-cent stamp? And ain't I worth it as an artist, as an African-American artist to my own people? Ain't I worth more than what I'm being offered, right? And this show was important for me to show this in because it's an all-Black show. And I know that each one of my peers have at some point experienced the same thing, right? And we are worth it. And I think that's a question that we all have to ask collectively. And when we come together to do things like this, it demonstrates exactly what our worth is, right? We can do whatever we put our minds to, whatever we come together to do. And regardless of whether or not we are acknowledged outside of ourselves, what matters is that we never lose the reference point of who we are. Yeah, and that's it.
Thank you, Antonio. Thank you so much. It's wonderful to see you as well. So next, I'd like to introduce Armando Reyes and his work that I'll bring up here in a minute. All right, Armando.
Hello, Leslie, you good? Good. Yeah, so this is just a little representation of my work. My name is Armando. I work primarily in wood as my medium. I own a business called Lake Erie Woodworks, where we build custom furniture and cabinetry and do custom woodworking for commercial and residential clients. Woodworking is something that's been in my family, brought from Mexico with my grandfather when he immigrated to Chicago in 1956. He kind of brought his woodworking knowledge with him, and it was kind of how they got through those first few years here before he found permanent work, just building things for friends or people he met, and just kind of using that to kind of kickstart their life here in the States. And so it's passed down to his 7 boys, and my father and my uncles passed it down to us. And growing up, they all had a basic kind of woodworking space in the basement, or that kind of thing. And when it came time for me, when we moved to Erie, PA from Chicago, and we bought our house, I started to get that same sort of I wanted to sort of create that thing for myself also, a little kind of workshop where I can make things to work on the house, or pieces of furniture and that kind of thing. So I really dove deep into it, and eventually the hobby turned into a side business, turned into a full-time business. And being part of this collective of artists, it was really challenging because wood is definitely a difficult medium to produce work in. That's like for a gallery. I don't do woodworking like in a very artistic way. So some people would say there's definitely people who do like artistic studio style, art wood furniture. And sometimes it's not super functional, or whatever the case may be, but I just don't make that kind of work. And so trying to figure out what I can do and how I can sort of put down to things that I want to say in this, through this medium, proved a little challenging. And so this idea came to me. I actually did this in our house in a more simple kind of crafty way, with our names, my name, my wife, and the kids, and like kind of put it together in this style with these Scrabble letter sort of ideas. And it's like, well, what if we took that idea and used different words to create this same sort of the same idea, but using different words. And so this piece is titled Words Matter. And a lot of it was just me going through in my head and trying to find words that were meaningful to me in one way or another, right? They generated one kind of emotion, whether it was positive or negative, or whatever it could be, but just they had some sort of meaning to me in my life, and just tried to put it all together in a way that they would fit together. And this is what I came up with.
All right, wonderful. Thank you, Armando. So I would like to kind of all of us come together now, since you all introduced yourselves and your work, and engage in a little bit more of a conversation about some of the things that you all are highlighting from your process and this show. One of the things that I kind of wanted to posit as a place for us to go to next is, what is it that we or you all as individuals feel is necessary for others to take away of this show and this experience of our art and of your art in this space together? What is something that you hope audience members and people that come in as guests into the space take away with them as an offering of sorts? Is there anything?
I think it depends on who comes into the space, right? If my detractors come into the space, I want them to feel like I just slapped them in the face, right? I want them to see the physical evidence contradicting their narrative that I have no value, right? That I don't belong in spaces like the Bruce Gallery, right? I want them to walk away feeling like I just kicked them in the ass, right? My supporters, I want them to come into spaces like that and feel a sense of confirmation, right? That they weren't wrong about believing in me, my talents, and my potential, right? To people who come into the gallery as neutral parties, invited by somebody else, they just happen to get lost in the hallway and turn down the wrong corridor. To them, I want them to choose a side. That's it.
I can tell you from my standpoint of view, I think, you know, you have up right now Armando's piece, and I think representation, right? Representation matters. When you walk into this gallery, it matters, right? Everybody that has shown artwork here might not have had the opportunities, the resources, to be able to show in a gallery or come together. I think I have seen shows here and out in Erie and in other places where people of color are shown as, you can tell that they're the token, right? We have all these other artists, but hey, we have this one person of color. We're showing you what they can do. And I think being part of this, you know, we can create given the opportunities. I have not done any artwork, right? I teach for the Inner City Neighborhood Art House. That is my passion, right? Where I've never created artwork. And this gave me and pushed me to say, hey, yes, you can. You can create art. You know, right now we're showing what my students' artwork, and it's important for me to create stuff. And I'm telling you guys should be artists. You guys can do this, you can do that. If I myself am not doing it, right, then that's not right. That's hypocritical. That's not right. It's good for my students, for the inner city youth, for the leaders, for the future, to let them know that whatever their thoughts, whatever they're going through, there is a way for them to express it, right? As artists, I went to Columbia College, I got my degree in photography, but I never saw myself as an artist. Why? Because I never saw that representation. I would go to galleries, I worked at a museum, and it was always not somebody that looked like me or represented me, right? So I think it's very important for the younger generations to see themselves in opportunities and be like, hey, I can do that. So, yeah.
So Lourdes, I kind of want to go back to something you just said. I have up the 4 of your students' work that's also in the gallery space. Can you tell us a little bit about who are your students? What was that process of them creating this work, and a little bit of the background context for us?
Right. So I work for the Inner City Neighborhood Art House. It's a nonprofit organization where we teach visual, performing, and environmental action classes to at-risk youth at no cost. Again, at no cost. Exclamation point on that. I teach photography. I do digital photography with my students. I have had some of my students that are right here. I believe the last 3 pictures, the last 3 ones, those are students who I've had since they were 10. And now they're 15, 14, and they're still coming. We actually extended our age group because they wanted to keep coming, and why not, right? If we see a need, we'll go ahead and change things. For my kids, I make a point to not tell them what to photograph. We walk around our neighborhood, around, downtown Erie. We walk around and we photograph what we see. The first picture, it's from Ava. Ava, we were walking around half a block on German Street, and here we have this is a food library. People can leave little cans and non-perishable foods that people can come, but the kids noticed how it looked, right? It didn't have a lot of food, and it's just to show you the food desert that exists in this area, which is in the 16503 zip code. They have asked for a grocery store. One is coming, but will it have what the people are asking? That's yet to be seen, right? We have Black Lives Matter. This had just happened. And this was actually in the storefront of Amber and Forge, we were walking around. Once she just sat down and she's like, take my picture like this. This is a collaboration between Yes Lian and Tiajane. Tiajane sat down. She's like, I'm gonna put my fist up and then you take my picture. And I'm just an observer. I'm always an observer. I might give them a little bit of hints here and there, but this just so happened organically. And this is what encourages me to do this even more, right? So they did the Black Lives Matter. This was in the storefront. This is, everybody knows what happened in Ember and Forge during the protest for the George Floyd that happened here in Erie. It got, somebody threw something, whatever, it got on fire. The sign was taken down. And I don't know why, and I know why, but I cannot say, right? Anyway, they was still up. My students took advantage of that and they did it. I can tell you for the middle picture, my students, I had asked them, bring something that represents who you are. And I was like, clothing, gym shoes, anything that represents who you are. Here comes my student. She brought her Puerto Rican flag. I got so excited. And she's like, are you sure? I'm like, yes. I was like, yes, you do it. You do it. And they were just playing around with the flag. And there's multiple pictures of other Puerto Rican students saw the flag and they're like, hey, can I borrow it? So there's actually a lot more pictures of the students putting this flag, around their shoulders. There's another one. There's a kid that has it like Superman, which is awesome. And then we have the next one, which is by Tiajane. And again, just standing by, this is actually by, I believe, Lavery's. This is by Lavery's Brewery. And we're walking in the alley. It's this place we walk by this place every time, and they know the kids because they know it as my favorite building. It's my favorite building. It's kind of abandoned and forgotten. And she just told the girl, she's just like, hey, yes, Lian, get up there. And then she's like, put your hands up. This student is 14 years old. And we live in a society where they think 14-year-olds are not aware of the things that are happening. And they are. For a 14-year-old to tell another student, put your hands up, everybody knows what that means, right? And why not put him in this show? And I just, they need to be in the show. They represent what I think should be represented in this gallery.
Phenomenal. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. They're powerful, and the process behind them. Armando, is there anything you wanted to add?
I guess I'll just add quickly that I think there was something to the effect in this show was the first show of a collection of artists of color that had ever been presented, something along those lines. And just the fact that it's 2021, and if you're listening to this and watching this, if you've ever been to an art gallery and saw work specifically in this area, that the fact that there's never been an art show collected of just artists of color is pretty astounding. And again, it is about representation. It's about opportunity, right? The idea that either artists of color don't exist, or their work is not good enough to be put in a gallery, or they can't create work for galleries. All of that is false. And it's just a matter of, are these artists able to get the same opportunities that other artists are getting? And once they get them, how can we capitalize on those opportunities? So it's just something to think about, that a collection of art like this just hadn't ever existed before. It's pretty amazing to think about.
Absolutely. And, some of the things, well, first I wanted to say, please post questions or comments in the chat box. And I'm going to open it up in a couple of minutes to hear from you all that are in attendance. But some of the threads that I'm hearing here are about resistance, about challenging the systems that we work within, and that we live with it in our everyday lives. But I'm also hearing validation, right? The validating of each other's voices. I know that for me, being a part of this experience was very validating, that I wasn't alone in what I am feeling and experiencing in my day-to-day life within, as an artist or a curator. And the other thing, the two more things that I'll say briefly is that, Armando, your piece, one of the things that I really love about it is your bilingual depictions and representation that come through the vocabulary words that you chose to put together for this Scrabble piece artwork, right? Words matter. And I love that you chose to put, raza, cultura, resistencia, barrio, these things that have very specific connotations to me when I see them and read them, and we each have connections to them. And the other thing that I was also going to say is how I'm hearing you all express in one way or another, the power of being able to choose, the power to be able to choose and say, I want to share my voice with these other human beings and have a creative expression with them, right? The power of community coming together, the power of reframing our worth, as Antonio had touched on, with taking something that might be used as a derogatory term, right? Prison art or prison artist, and reframing that for self-empowerment. That's power, right? These are all beautiful manifestations of power. So I want to open it up. Please share what, some questions, comments. There's one already here. I'm just going to read. For Lourdes, what was part of your decision making when you made your artist statement in Spanish without translation? Great question.
So I make a conscious decision for that because I want you, who's mainly usually the people that are our audience, are mainly English speakers, right? I want you to, or it's your first language and that's the only language that you might know. I want you to feel how I feel when I have to translate, when I was younger, translate everything. Spanish is my first language. I want you to have that feeling of, wait a minute, let me copy and paste her artist statement and put it on Google Translate and find the meaning of this. I still do that, and if you didn't notice, language to me is still a barrier for me. I don't have the words sometimes because I have been told so many times that my words don't matter. So that's one of the main reasons. Do the work, search it, translate it.
I love that.
They matter, Lourdes. They matter.
Thank you.
And that speaks to our different vernaculars and dialects, right? Language can mean so many things, not just spoken oral words, right, or written words, but art is a language, right? And so, all right, let's see. All right, this is a question for Armando. My class was really aware of how many words were in English as Spanish, and that positive, empowering words were in Spanish. The word alte, not in English, a clear declaration of agency. They noticed some letters were bigger than others, the F, the E. Why? Is there a reason? Several pieces inspired long discussions. Thank you, all of you, for making us pay attention to words and matter and how words matter. Thank you, Dr. Wellman. So Armando?
Yeah, so thank you for that question. I did get that question a lot because if you do look, some of the E's are bigger and the F's are bigger. So I did that project. Those are not if you're just looking at it, if you haven't been there in person, it's not like a sticker or an application. Those are carved into the wooden blocks, and I carved them on our CNC machine. And honestly, it was an accident. They are not done on purpose. When I went to cut all of the E's, I had to keep all of this stuff in order, and it was like, how many R's do I need? How many E's do I need? How many L's do I need? And as I was cutting them, I was trying to make sure everything was sized appropriately. And for some reason, the E's and the F's were the wrong size. So it is not on purpose. It was an accident. I think it adds to the human nature, especially when you think about digital fabrication in the world we live in today. Some people think like, well, a lot of these machines are kind of taking over for some of the work that we do by hand. But it just goes to show that if you don't do things 100% correctly, you're only going to get out what you put in. And so, it was an accident. It was not intentional. But the idea of the Spanish words having sort of a positive influence, and then maybe the English words having a negative connotation, that's definitely there. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but it just felt like when I hear those words in my head in that language, and maybe it does come from that, right? Because when you hear some of these words in English, they're taken in a certain context, and then in Spanish, again, like you hear those words related. They just have a certain context, and the way that I hear them in my head, I hear them in that language. And maybe there's something, there's some internal dialogue happening there, that maybe there's positive and negative happening in two different languages. It's definitely possible, but none of it is really, as far as those letters have any kind of a deeper meaning than that. It was just kind of
So a follow-up question, Armando, with the same is the word raza earned such a high score on your Scrabble this year. Were you thinking of visual emphasis or variety that gives a musicality to the grid and repetition?
Yeah, I wanted to make sure that, that all of those words it didn't matter what language they came in, and I think a word like, so for example, like raza and race are sometimes considered the same word, like raza is like similar to your race, but I think when we use that word in Spanish, raza is tied also like heavily into like your culture and your language and the people and your traditions, and raza is really like an all-encompassing word of everything. It's not just I'm Mexican American, or I'm Cuban or Puerto Rican. It's not just your ethnicity or your race. Raza is really tied into everything, your food, and it was part of that sort of rallying cry in the times in like sort of the mid 60s, like Chicano era, where Viva la Raza was like sort of a protest cry during that time, and like a lot of that is tied into not just your straight ethnic background, but it's just tied into everything that's part of your culture and stuff. So I tried to include all of those things. All those things just kind of generated, like I said, all of these words generated some kind of emotion, and there's a whole list of them that I wrote down. These were just the ones that happened to kind of get filtered through and really stand out and actually just function in an art piece, because a lot of these words had to actually tie themselves together in one way or another. It's through the letters. So, there was a lot of, decisions that had to be made with that.
Fantastic. So as we only have a couple minutes left, I did want to touch on to see if everyone wanted to share briefly what you're currently working on, right? Because this show actually took about a year to put together and for artists to create their works, for the curatorial process, and working closely with Lisa Austin in the space. It was supposed to open last fall. Because of COVID, it got, we hit pause, and so it took a while to get all the pieces in motion. But I wanted to know, if maybe Antonio and then Lourdes and Armando, if you wanted to just briefly say what you're currently working on right now. And it doesn't have to be necessarily creating art.
I'm working on a couple things, murals primarily in the community, personal paintings that capture the African-American contribution to Erie through business and the arts historically, and a piece that I think should open up a question in America in these times about the treatment, the mistreatment and abuse of children. It's called Pederasty. It's probably one of the deepest pieces I think I've done, and involves all of the historically respected figures in our society and their history of abuse toward children, but their position surrounding a small child in the middle, the samurai, the Catholic priests, the artist, and others in our community. And it seems like they're tutoring the child, right? They're bestowing the information that they have upon the child, but in reality, in history, they're all guilty of abusing children. And I think that we need to have that discussion. So that's what I'm working on.
Wonderful. Thank you, Antonio. Lourdes?
I am currently working on self-development. I'm actually trying to learn other mediums. I am taking weaving class. I am in the future will be taking a wood carving class with Freddie Malaki. I've created this piece specific for this art show, and it did bring spark, wanting to create more. And yeah, I'm working on self-development, just trying to learn more mediums, see what else I can create. I don't practice it as much as I would want to. And again, that's just to show you my upbringing in, I still have a hard time calling myself an artist. I've been doing art with kids for 16 years, but I still have to call myself an emerging artist. Right. So yeah, that's what I'm working on. To be honest, my passion is finding opportunities for others. That is my art form. I get more of a high out of that. I am currently working with the Jazz Festival and trying to get members from Chroma Guild to showcase some of their artwork and maybe do some demos. It's work in process, working with artists, just trying to showcase them. And I'm at the art house. Our schedules are out for anybody that has kids out there. Inner city youth, if you know any inner city youth looking to do art, neighborhood art house is available. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. Armando? Armando?
So professionally, I'm just been busy running the business. The business is a full-time endeavor for me now. So if people were familiar with the life of a small business owner / entrepreneur / husband and / father and / everything else that we do, it's really busy. And so that's kind of all consuming in my life right now. I really did enjoy the opportunity to force myself to consider creating a work for a show like this. One of the things that I kind of want to touch on that I didn't in working with this piece is I really started to think about what it meant, because a lot of projects I make, I don't, again, like Lourdes was saying, I don't see them as art that belongs in a show. But I started to think that maybe it's less about the art that I produce, but it's more about the fact that I'm producing it that is really the message that needs to be conveyed, right? So if I were to just create a piece of furniture and set it in a gallery, it may not be something that people even look twice at. But the fact that a young Mexican American man from from the inner city of Chicago has made it to the point where he's running his own business, building custom furniture, that in itself is sort of the revolutionary aspect. The fact that I exist to create work is the work itself. And I think I'm starting to realize there's more power in the fact that I just create things, less in what I'm actually creating. And so I think there's things for me to move on with that mindset. And then hopefully, things like this, art like this, shows like this continue to exist for us to kind of keep that ball rolling.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you, Antonio, Lourdes, and Armando for being with us tonight, for sharing a little piece of your life with us tonight. I miss you all, and I'm glad that you're all doing well. It was wonderful to see you and to hear you speak on your work and the value of what we are doing together, even though we're not in the same community. Thank you so much. Have a great night. Thank you for all of those who attended this virtual conversation. Thank you, Lisa, Edinburgh University, for hosting and facilitating and making this available as an opportunity for us. We appreciate it. Erie Arts and Culture. Yes.
Yes, I just wanted to jump in, and we had a moment here. I can't quite tell, but if you can see, I'm just coming around this piece so people can get a better idea. And you're all welcome to the gallery. We're going to be open for 3 more weeks with the Let's Pretend show until the 24th. And that's 3 to 6, Monday through Friday, but we are closed on holidays. So thank you all for coming tonight.
Thank you.
Love you, Leslie.
Love you guys too. Have a great night.